The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of northern Afghanistan as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her headset and scanned the horizon through her tank's periscope. The M1A2 Abrams beneath her hummed with quiet power, its 120mm cannon pointing toward the valley below where her fellow soldiers had been pinned down for over 18 hours. Maria had been driving tanks for 8 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. 3 miles ahead, a Navy SEAL team was trapped in a compound surrounded by Taliban fighters. The insurgents had the high ground, heavy weapons, and seemingly unlimited ammunition. 2 rescue attempts had already failed, leaving 4 more soldiers wounded, and the team's morale shattered. The radio crackled with the voice of Lieutenant Commander James Walsh, the SEAL team leader. His usually steady tone carried the weight of exhaustion and desperation. "Control, this is Bravo 6. We're down to our last magazines. Request immediate extraction or we're not making it out of here." Maria listened as the command center responded with the same answer they'd been giving all morning. Air support was grounded due to a massive sandstorm approaching from the west. Artillery couldn't get a clear shot without risking civilian casualties in the nearby village. The road leading to the compound was heavily mined, making vehicle approach nearly impossible. That's when Maria made a decision that would change everything. She switched to the command frequency and spoke directly to Colonel Harrison, the mission commander. "Sir, this is Tank 7. I have a proposal." The colonel's voice came back immediately. "Go ahead, Rodriguez." The terrain maps show a steep ridge on the eastern side of the compound. It's considered impassable for vehicles, which is why the Taliban haven't fortified it. But I think I can get my tank over that ridge and hit their positions from behind. There was a long pause before the colonel responded. "Rodriguez, that ridge has a 60-degree incline in some places. Tank manuals say anything over 45 degrees is impossible." Maria looked at her gunner, Corporal David Kim, who had been with her crew for 2 years. He nodded slightly, understanding what she was thinking. Her loader, Private First Class Tommy Johnson, checked his ammunition count again and gave her a thumbs up. Her driver, Specialist Sarah Martinez, had already started plotting the route on her navigation system. "Sir, manuals are written by people who've never been in situations like this," Maria replied. "These SEALs have families waiting for them at home. I'm not going to let them die because a book says something can't be done." The radio was silent for almost a minute. Finally, the colonel's voice returned. "Rodriguez, you understand that if you attempt this and fail, you'll likely roll that tank and kill your entire crew?" "Yes, sir. But if we don't try, those SEALs are dead anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to save them." Maria could hear heated discussion in the background at command. She used the time to study the terrain more carefully through her thermal imaging system. The eastern ridge was indeed steep, covered with loose rocks and scattered boulders. One wrong move would send 68 tons of steel tumbling down the mountainside. But Maria had grown up on her grandfather's farm in rural Texas, where she'd learned to drive tractors on impossible slopes during harvest season. Her grandfather had taught her that sometimes the only way forward was straight up, even when everyone else said it couldn't be done. The SEAL team's situation was deteriorating rapidly. Through the radio chatter, Maria could hear gunfire intensifying around their position. Lieutenant Commander Walsh reported that they were now completely surrounded, with Taliban fighters closing in from 3 directions. "Bravo 6, this is Control," came the command center's voice. "Be advised, Tank 7 is attempting a rescue operation. Maintain your position for another 30 minutes. Walsh's response was immediate. "Control, negative. We don't have 30 minutes. These guys are preparing for a final assault." That's when Maria heard something that made her blood run cold. In the background of Walsh's transmission, she could hear one of the SEALs calling out grid coordinates for an airstrike on their own position. They were preparing for the ultimate sacrifice, taking as many enemy fighters with them as possible. "Not today," Maria whispered to herself, then keyed her microphone. "Control, Tank 7 is moving to attack position now, whether we have authorization or not." She switched to her crew's internal communication system. "All right, team, you heard the situation. This is going to be the ride of our lives. Martinez, take us to the base of that eastern ridge. Kim, start calculating firing solutions for when we reach the top. Johnson, Make sure every round is ready to go." As their tank began moving toward the seemingly impossible ridge, Maria thought about the letter she'd written to her daughter back home. 8-year-old Sophia had asked why her mom had to go so far away to help people. Maria had explained that sometimes good people find themselves in bad situations, and it takes other good people to help them get out. Today, she was going to prove that sometimes the impossible was just another word for difficult. The Abrams tank churned up dust and gravel as it approached the base of the eastern ridge. Through her periscope, Maria could see Taliban muzzle flashes in the distance, concentrated around the compound where the SEALs were trapped. The enemy fighters had no idea that salvation was about to come from the one direction they never expected. As they reached the bottom of the ridge, Martinez stopped the tank and looked up at the impossible slope ahead. "Ma'am, you sure about this? Because once we start up that ridge, there's no turning back." Maria took one last look at the tactical display showing the SEAL team's desperate situation. "Specialist Martinez, fire up this beast and show these mountains what American steel can do." The first 50 yards up the ridge seemed manageable. The Abrams tank's tracks found purchase on the rocky surface, and Maria felt a surge of hope. But as they climbed higher, the slope became more treacherous. Loose stones scattered beneath the massive vehicle, and several times the tank slipped backward before the tracks caught hold again. Martinez fought with the controls, using every technique she'd learned in tank school, and some she was inventing on the spot. The engine roared at maximum power, pumping diesel exhaust into the thin mountain air. Inside the crew compartment, everyone held on to whatever they could find as the tank tilted at angles that should have been impossible. 30 degrees, and climbing, Martinez called out, reading the inclinometer. At 40 degrees, tank doctrine said they should have stopped. At 50 degrees, they were in uncharted territory. Through the radio, Maria could hear the SEAL team's situation getting worse. "Control, this is Bravo 6. They've breached the outer wall. We're falling back to the main building. Request that tank operation be expedited." "Bravo 6, Tank 7 is approximately 15 minutes out," came the response from command. 15 minutes. Maria knew they didn't have 15 minutes. At the rate the Taliban was advancing, the SEALs would be overrun in half that time. "Martinez, can you give me more speed?" Maria asked. "Ma'am, if I push any harder, we're going to lose traction completely. This ridge is like climbing a pile of marbles." That's when Corporal Kim spoke up from his gunner's position. "Sergeant, what if we use the main gun for counterbalance? Fire a round backward to help push us up when we start sliding." It was a crazy idea, but Maria had run out of conventional options. "Johnson, load a high-explosive round and prepare for unconventional firing solution." As they reached the steepest part of the ridge, the tank began sliding backward despite Martinez's best efforts. The 68-ton vehicle was fighting gravity and losing. Maria could feel the rear of the tank starting to lift off the ground. "Now, Kim, fire the main gun." The 120mm cannon roared, sending a massive blast of energy backward down the ridge. The recoil pushed the tank forward just enough for the tracks to catch on a stable rock formation. They lurched upward another 20 yards. But the physics of their situation was becoming critical. At 62 degrees of incline, the tank was approaching its tipping point. One wrong move would send them tumbling backward in a devastating roll that would crush everything in its path. Through her periscope, Maria could see the top of the ridge, still 50 yards away. Below them, the compound where the SEALs were trapped looked like a toy model. She could see muzzle flashes inside the building now, meaning the Taliban had broken through the outer defenses. "Ma'am, we've got a problem," Martinez announced. "The engine temperature is redlining. We're about to lose power." Maria's mind raced through their options. Without engine power, they would definitely roll backward. But if they overheated the engine, they'd be stuck on this ridge with no way to help anyone. That's when she remembered something her grandfather had taught her about driving tractors on steep hills. Sometimes you had to use gravity as your friend instead of fighting it as your enemy. "Martinez, cut the engine for 30 seconds. Let her cool down while we use momentum." "Ma'am, if I cut the engine, we're going to slide backward. Trust me." "Kim, prepare another round." "Johnson, get ready to shift our weight forward on my command." The engine went silent, and for a terrifying moment, the massive tank hung motionless on the impossible slope. Then, Gravity took hold, and they began sliding backward. But Maria had timed it perfectly. Just as they started to pick up speed, Martinez restarted the engine. The fresh power, combined with their momentum, launched them up the final stretch of the ridge. Suddenly, they were at the top, looking down into the valley on the other side. The compound was spread out below them like a tactical map, with Taliban positions clearly visible. The enemy fighters had concentrated their forces around the main building, completely unaware that death was approaching from above. Target acquired, Kim announced, training the main gun on the largest group of insurgents. Multiple enemy fighters, approximately 200 yards, northwest of the main building. Through her thermal scope, Maria could see the heat signatures of at least 30 Taliban fighters preparing for a final assault on the SEAL position. They had rocket-propelled grenades, heavy machine guns, and enough firepower to overwhelm the trapped Americans in minutes. Kim, you are cleared to engage. Show them what American armor can do. The first high-explosive round took out an entire squad of Taliban fighters who had been setting up a mortar position. The explosion was so massive that insurgents throughout the compound stopped their assault and looked around in confusion. They couldn't figure out where the attack was coming from. Target eliminated, Kim reported with satisfaction. Acquiring next target. The second round destroyed a heavy machine gun nest that had been pouring fire into the SEAL position. Suddenly, the radio crackled with Lieutenant Commander Walsh's voice, and for the first time in hours, he sounded hopeful. Control, this is Bravo 6. I don't know where that tank fire is coming from, but it's working. The pressure on our position has decreased significantly. Maria smiled as she acquired the next target. Bravo 6, this is Tank 7. We're on the ridge above you, and we're just getting started. There was a long pause before Walsh responded. Tank 7, did you just say you're on the ridge? The Eastern Ridge? That's impossible. Bravo 6, a lot of things are impossible until someone does them. Now stay low while we clean house. From their elevated position, Maria and her crew had a perfect view of the entire battlefield. They could see Taliban fighters trying to reposition themselves, but there was nowhere to hide from the tank's devastating firepower. The insurgents had planned for every contingency except the one that was currently destroying their forces from an impossible position. Kim fired round after round with surgical precision, each shot eliminating a specific threat to the trapped SEALs. Johnson worked like a machine, loading ammunition faster than he ever had in training. Martinez kept the tank stable on the narrow ridge top, making precise adjustments to give Kim the best possible firing angles. But Maria knew their work was far from over. Through her thermal imaging, she could see more Taliban reinforcements moving up the valley toward the compound. The insurgents were regrouping, and they would soon figure out where the tank fire was coming from. The real battle was just beginning. The Taliban fighters below were learning fast. After losing 3 major positions to the mysterious tank fire, they began spreading out and using the civilian buildings in the nearby village as cover. Maria realized that her advantage was about to become a liability. From her elevated position, she couldn't engage targets near the village without risking civilian casualties. Kim, hold fire on sectors 7 and 8. Too many civilian structures, Maria commanded, watching as Taliban fighters disappeared into the village buildings. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Walsh was organizing his SEAL team for a potential breakout. Tank 7, this is Bravo 6. Your fire support has given us some breathing room, but we've got wounded who can't move quickly. Can you provide cover for an extraction route? Maria studied the tactical display, tracing possible evacuation paths from the compound to a safe landing zone for helicopters. The problem was that every route led through areas where the Taliban could easily set up ambushes. Bravo 6, negative on extraction routes. All paths are exposed to enemy fire. But I have another idea. Can your team hold that compound for another hour? Tank 7, what do you have in mind? Before Maria could answer, her radio exploded with urgent chatter from the command center. All units, be advised. Large enemy force moving up the valley from the south. Estimated 40 to 50 fighters with heavy weapons. ETA to compound, 30 minutes. Specialist Martinez looked up from her navigation console with concern. Ma'am, if they get mortars positioned on the south ridge, they'll have a clear shot at us up here. We'll be sitting ducks. Maria knew Martinez was right. Their impossible position on the eastern ridge had given them a temporary advantage, but it also made them extremely vulnerable if the enemy gained positions on the surrounding high ground. That's when Corporal Kim made an observation that changed everything. "Sergeant, look at this." He was studying the compound through his thermal scope. "These buildings aren't just random structures. This looks like it was a military base at some point. There are reinforced positions and what looks like an underground bunker system." Maria examined the thermal readings more carefully. Kim was absolutely right. The compound the SEALs were trapped in had been constructed as a defensive position, probably by Soviet forces decades earlier during their occupation of Afghanistan. The buildings were connected by underground tunnels, and there were prepared fighting positions that could be defended against a much larger force. "Bravo 6, this is Tank 7. Are you aware you're in what appears to be a former Soviet firebase?" Walsh's response came back immediately. "Tank 7, affirmative. We discovered the tunnel system about an hour ago, but didn't want to risk exploring it with hostiles topside. Bravo 6, those tunnels might be your salvation. If you can secure the underground positions, you'll have protection from mortar fire and multiple exit points." While Walsh discussed the tunnel option with his team, Maria faced her own tactical challenge. The approaching Taliban reinforcements would soon have the firepower to destroy her tank, even on the ridge. But she also couldn't abandon the SEALs when they were so close to a possible solution. "Johnson, how much ammunition do we have left?" she asked her loader. 12 high-explosive rounds, 8 armor-piercing, and about 300 rounds for the coaxial machine gun. It wasn't much for the fight that was coming. Maria made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone following standard military doctrine, but she was long past caring about standard anything. "Martinez, I need you to reposition us along this ridge line. We're going to move east to west, hitting the Taliban reinforcements as they come up the valley. Kim, you're going to have to make every shot count." As the tank began moving along the narrow ridge top, Maria realized she was essentially using a 68-ton vehicle as a mobile sniper platform. The precision required was incredible, and one mistake would send them tumbling down either side of the mountain. But the strategy worked. From their moving position, Kim was able to engage the Taliban reinforcements before they could establish defensive positions. The first few rounds scattered the advancing force and destroyed 2 technical vehicles mounted with heavy machine guns. However, the Taliban quickly adapted to this new threat. Instead of advancing in a concentrated group, they began infiltrating the valley in small teams, using natural cover to avoid the tank's devastating fire. "Ma'am, they're getting smart," Kim reported. "I can see muzzle flashes, but they're moving too quickly for me to get good target locks." That's when Maria heard something that made her heart sink. The unmistakable whistle of incoming mortar rounds. The Taliban had managed to get at least one mortar crew into position, and they were zeroing in on the tank's location. The first mortar round exploded 30 yards short of their position, showering the tank with rocks and debris. The second round was closer, landing just 15 yards away. Maria knew the third round would likely be a direct hit. "Martinez, emergency relocation. Move us to grid 77 Alpha now." The tank lurched forward along the ridge, tracks struggling for purchase on the loose rock. Behind them, the third mortar round exploded exactly where they had been positioned moments before. But their movement had revealed their position to every Taliban fighter in the valley. Suddenly, the ridge line was being swept by automatic weapons fire. Most of the bullets bounced harmlessly off the tank's armor, but Maria could hear some rounds finding gaps in the vision ports and communication equipment. "Sergeant, we've lost our long-range radio," Johnson reported. "Whatever happens now, we're on our own." Without communication with command, Maria couldn't coordinate with other friendly forces or call for artillery support. They were isolated on an impossible ridge, facing an enemy that was growing larger and more organized by the minute. But down in the compound, Lieutenant Commander Walsh and his SEAL team were making the underground bunker system work in their favor. They had discovered that the Soviet-era tunnels connected not just the buildings in the compound, but extended out to observation posts in the surrounding area. "Tank 7, this is Bravo 6. Walsh's voice crackled over the short-range radio. "We found something interesting down here. These tunnels lead to positions where we can provide you with spotting support and cover some of your blind spots. For the first time since climbing the ridge, Maria felt a surge of genuine hope. If the SEALs could provide intelligence on enemy movements and help coordinate targeting, her tank crew might actually survive this impossible situation. Bravo 6, that's the best news I've heard all day. What's your tactical assessment? Tank 7, we count approximately 60 enemy fighters in 3 groups. Main force is still south of your position, but smaller teams are trying to flank you from the north and west. Also, be advised, we've spotted what looks like a recoilless rifle team setting up on the western ridge. A recoilless rifle could penetrate the tank's armor if it hit the right spot. Maria knew they were running out of time and options. The enemy was closing in from multiple directions, and her crew was low on ammunition. But she also knew that giving up wasn't an option. 8 Navy SEALs were counting on her, and she had never failed a mission in her 8 years of service. "All right, people," she announced to her crew. "We didn't come this far to only come this far. Let's show these Taliban fighters why they should never corner American soldiers." The final phase of the battle was about to begin. The recoilless rifle team on the western ridge fired their first round just as Maria's tank was repositioning. The projectile screamed past the turret, missing by less than 10 feet. If they had waited another 30 seconds, the shot would have been devastating. "Kim, priority target, western ridge, approximately 800 meters," Maria called out, her voice steady despite the near miss. The main gun traversed smoothly, and Kim took careful aim through his thermal sight. The recoilless rifle crew was trying to reload, but they had made the mistake of silhouetting themselves against the skyline. Target acquired. Firing. The high-explosive round struck the position perfectly, eliminating the immediate threat to Maria's tank. But the celebration was short-lived. Through her periscope, Maria could see Taliban fighters scaling the northern face of her ridge, attempting to reach her position on foot. "Bravo 6, this is Tank 7. I've got climbers on my position. Can you see them from your tunnel network?" Lieutenant Commander Walsh responded immediately. "Tank 7, affirmative. We have eyes on approximately 8 fighters with RPGs climbing the north face. We can't engage from here, but we can guide your machine gun fire." Martinez was already traversing the coaxial machine gun toward the climbing fighters. "I've got them in sight, but the angle is extreme. I'm not sure I can get effective fire." That's when Johnson, the youngest member of the crew, made a suggestion that would have been dismissed in any normal tactical situation. "Sergeant, what if we use the tank's movement to create better firing angles? Rock the tank side to side while Martinez fires." Using a tank's movement to enhance machine gun accuracy was not covered in any manual, but nothing about their current situation was covered in any manual. "Do it, Martinez. Johnson, you and I are going to shift our weight to help with the rocking motion." The massive tank began swaying back and forth on the narrow ridge, a 68-ton pendulum that created brief moments when the machine gun could target the climbing fighters. Martinez fired in controlled bursts during these moments, and her accuracy was devastating. Meanwhile, the main Taliban force in the valley below had finally organized for a coordinated assault on both the SEAL position and Maria's tank. Through the radio, she could hear Walsh directing his team's defensive preparations. "Bravo 6, what's your ammunition status?" Maria asked. "Tank 7, we're down to about 30%. But these tunnel positions are giving us excellent fields of fire. If we can hold them for another 20 minutes, the sandstorm should clear and we'll have air support." 20 minutes seemed like an eternity given their current situation, but Maria knew they had to try. The Taliban force below was moving with military precision, using covering fire and coordinated advances that suggested professional training. "Kim, start targeting their command elements. Look for fighters who are directing others or coordinating movement." Kim began systematically eliminating Taliban leaders, causing confusion in their ranks. But the enemy adapted quickly, with new leaders stepping up to replace those who had been killed. The battle was becoming a deadly game of chess, with both sides making moves and counter-moves in an effort to gain the decisive advantage. Maria's tank crew had the firepower advantage, but the Taliban had numbers and local terrain knowledge. That's when the unexpected happened. Through her thermal imaging, Maria spotted a lone figure moving along the eastern edge of the battlefield. The heat signature was different from the Taliban fighters, and the movement pattern suggested military training. Bravo 6. Do you have any personnel outside your current position? Tank 7. Negative. All team members are accounted for in the tunnel system. As Maria watched the mysterious figure, she realized it was moving toward a position that would give it a clear shot at her tank with what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade. But something about the movement seemed familiar. Kim, can you get a visual identification on the figure at grid 66 Charlie? Kim adjusted his sight and studied the target carefully. Ma'am, that's not Taliban. Movement pattern and equipment configuration suggest friendly forces. Before Maria could respond, her radio crackled with a new voice. Tank 7, this is Delta 4. I'm Master Chief Petty Officer Stevens, DevGru. I've been observing your position for the last hour, and I've got good news. DevGru was the Navy's elite counterterrorism unit, and Maria realized that reinforcements had somehow reached their location despite the impossible terrain. Delta 4, how did you get to this position? Tank 7, let's just say your idea about climbing impossible ridges inspired some creative thinking. I've got 3 more operators moving into Overwatch positions. We can provide sniper support and help coordinate your fire with ground intelligence. The addition of elite special operations snipers changed the tactical equation dramatically. With their precision fire and intelligence gathering capabilities, Maria's tank crew suddenly had the support they needed to turn the tide of battle. Delta 4, what's your assessment of enemy strength and positions? Tank 7, I count 52 enemy fighters in the valley, but they're about to receive reinforcements from the south. Large convoy, approximately 15 vehicles, ETA 10 minutes. 15 vehicles could carry anywhere from 60 to 100 additional fighters. Even with sniper support, Maria's single tank would be overwhelmed by those numbers. But Master Chief Stevens had more information. Tank 7, be advised, that convoy is moving through a narrow canyon approach. If you can get 1 or 2 rounds into the right positions, you can create a rock slide that will block their advance. Maria studied her tactical display, tracing the convoy's likely route through the canyon. Stevens was right. The geological survey maps showed unstable rock formations that could be triggered by well-placed explosions. Kim, can you calculate firing solutions for indirect fire into canyon walls? Ma'am, it's not optimal, but I can make it work. I'll need precise coordinates and timing. Stevens provided the coordinates, and Kim began calculating the complex ballistics required for indirect fire at extreme range. Meanwhile, the battle in the valley below continued to intensify, with Taliban fighters making determined advances toward both the SEAL position and the base of Maria's Ridge. Johnson, how many high-explosive rounds do we have left? 6 rounds, ma'am. After that, we're down to armor-piercing and machine gun ammunition. 6 rounds to stop a convoy of 15 vehicles and eliminate the remaining Taliban fighters in the valley. Maria realized she was facing the most challenging tactical situation of her career, but she also knew that failure was not an option. All right, people, this is it. We're going to stop that convoy, break the remaining resistance in the valley, and get those SEALs home safely. Everyone ready? The responses came back with determination. Ready, ma'am. As Maria prepared for the most critical moments of the battle, she thought once more about her daughter Sophia back home. Today, she would prove that sometimes the impossible was just another word for the beginning of the solution. The timing had to be perfect. Master Chief Stevens was tracking the Taliban convoy through the canyon using his advanced spotting scope, while Kim calculated the precise trajectory needed to trigger the rock slide. Maria knew they would only get one chance. Tank 7, this is Delta 4. Convoy is entering the kill zone in 30 seconds. First vehicle is a technical with heavy machine gun, followed by 2 troop trucks. Kim made final adjustments to his firing solution. Ma'am, I'm ready. But the angle is extreme, and I'll be firing blind after the first round due to dust and debris. Delta 4, can you provide adjustment fire for subsequent rounds? Tank 7, affirmative. I have clear lines of sight to both impact areas. Maria took a deep breath. Everything they had accomplished over the past 2 hours would be meaningless if this convoy reached the valley and reinforced the Taliban fighters already in position. Kim, fire when ready. The first high-explosive round arced high over the valley, and struck the canyon wall approximately 50 meters above the convoy's position. The explosion sent tons of rock cascading down, but the lead vehicles managed to accelerate through the debris field before the passage was completely blocked. Tank 7. First round partially effective. 3 vehicles through, but the rest are trapped. Adjust fire left 200 meters for secondary rock slide. Kim fired the second round immediately, and this time the results were devastating. A massive section of the canyon wall collapsed, completely sealing the passage and trapping the remaining Taliban reinforcements on the wrong side of the mountains. But 3 vehicles had made it through, carrying an estimated 30 fighters with heavy weapons. Maria watched through her thermal imaging as these reinforcements spread out through the valley, immediately beginning to coordinate with the existing Taliban forces. Bravo 6, this is Tank 7. Heads up, you've got fresh hostiles in the valley with heavy weapons. Lieutenant Commander Walsh responded from the tunnel system. Tank 7, we copy. But we've got some good news down here. We found the firebase's old ammunition storage. Looks like the Soviets left some presents behind. Maria wasn't sure what Walsh meant until she saw explosions beginning to rock Taliban positions throughout the valley. The SEALs had discovered stockpiles of Soviet-era explosives and were using their demolitions training to turn the enemy's defensive positions into death traps. Nicely done, Bravo 6. How's your wounded status? Tank 7. All wounded are stable and mobile. These tunnel positions have given us time to provide proper medical care. With the immediate threat of massive reinforcements eliminated and the SEALs gaining the initiative in the valley, Maria thought they might actually survive this impossible situation. But Master Chief Stevens had been monitoring enemy communications, and he had disturbing intelligence. Tank 7, this is Delta 4. Intercepted enemy radio traffic indicates they're calling for air support. Estimated arrival time for hostile helicopters is 15 minutes. Taliban helicopters would change everything. From the air, they could easily destroy Maria's tank on the exposed ridge, and they could provide devastating support to their ground forces in the valley. Delta 4, what type of aircraft are we looking at? Tank 7, intelligence suggests old Soviet Mi-24 Hinds. Heavy armor, significant firepower. Your tank gun can engage them, but you'll need clear shots. Fighting helicopters with a tank was possible, but extremely challenging. The main gun could certainly destroy an aircraft, but targeting a fast-moving helicopter required skills that Maria had never trained for. That's when Corporal Kim made an observation that gave Maria hope. Ma'am, those incoming helicopters will have to approach through the same canyon system we just blocked. There are only 2 possible flight paths, and we can predict their approach vectors. Kim was right. The mountainous terrain would force the helicopters to follow predictable routes, giving the tank crew advance warning and clear firing opportunities. Kim, start calculating intercept courses for both possible approaches. Johnson, prepare high-explosive rounds with proximity fuses. While her crew prepared for aerial combat, Maria coordinated with both the SEAL team and the DevGru snipers to maximize their defensive capabilities. The Taliban forces in the valley were regrouping for what appeared to be a final assault, knowing that their air support would soon arrive. The next 10 minutes passed in a blur of coordinated violence. Maria's tank engaged ground targets while simultaneously preparing for the helicopter threat. The SEALs used their tunnel system to launch surprise attacks on Taliban positions. The DevGru snipers systematically eliminated enemy leaders and heavy weapons crews. Then, Maria heard the unmistakable sound of approaching helicopters. To Mi-24 Hinds were coming up the valley at low altitude, their rotors chopping through the mountain air with mechanical thunder. Kim, target the lead aircraft. Fire when you have a clear shot. The first helicopter appeared around a mountain peak, flying directly toward the tank's position. Kim tracked it smoothly, leading the target just as he had been trained, and fired. The high-explosive round missed the helicopter by 20 meters, but the proximity fuse detonated close enough to damage the aircraft's tail rotor. The pilot fought for control, but the helicopter spun violently and crashed into the valley floor in a massive fireball. The second helicopter had seen the fate of its companion and was taking evasive action, using the terrain for cover. But this gave Master Chief Stevens the opportunity he needed. Tank 7, this is Delta 4. I have clear shot at second aircraft with anti-tank weapon. Request you suppress ground targets while I engage. Maria's tank immediately began laying down suppressive fire on Taliban positions that might interfere with Stephen's shot. Moments later, she saw the streak of an anti-tank missile as it tracked the helicopter across the valley. The second helicopter exploded in midair, raining debris across the battlefield and eliminating the Taliban's last hope for victory. With their air support destroyed, their reinforcements blocked, and their ground forces decimated by coordinated attacks, the remaining Taliban fighters began withdrawing from the valley. The battle was over. Bravo 6, this is Tank 7. Valley appears to be clear of hostile forces. What's your status? Lieutenant Commander Walsh's response carried exhaustion, but unmistakable relief. Tank 7, all team members accounted for and ready for extraction. I don't know how you got that tank up on that ridge, but you saved our lives. As the dust settled and extraction helicopters finally appeared on the horizon, Maria reflected on the events of the day. She had climbed an impossible ridge, fought off overwhelming odds, and brought her crew and 8 Navy SEALs home safely. 3 months later, Maria stood in the White House East Room, wearing her dress blue uniform and trying not to fidget as the President of the United States prepared to present her with the Medal of Honor. Her daughter Sophia sat in the front row, beaming with pride. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty while serving as tank commander during combat operations in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's extraordinary heroism and selfless dedication to her fellow service members exemplify the finest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon herself, her unit, and the United States Army." But as Maria accepted the medal, she thought about her tank crew, the SEAL team, and Master Chief Stevens. The medal belonged to all of them, because sometimes the impossible was just another word for teamwork. After the ceremony, Sophia asked her mother the same question she had asked before the deployment. "Mom, why do you have to go so far away to help people?" Maria knelt down to her daughter's level and smiled. "Because sometimes, sweetheart, good people find themselves in bad situations. And when that happens, other good people have to be willing to do impossible things to help them get home safely." Sophia nodded solemnly, then grinned. "So you're like a superhero, but with a tank?" Maria laughed and hugged her daughter. "Something like that, baby. Something like that." Years later, the story of the tank that climbed an impossible ridge would become legend in military circles. New tank crews would study Maria's tactics, trying to understand how she had accomplished something that physics said was impossible. But Maria always told them the same thing. The impossible is just another word for something nobody's tried yet. And sometimes, when good people need help, you have to be willing to try. The Eastern Ridge in Afghanistan still bears the track marks of Maria's tank, carved into the rock as a permanent reminder that sometimes the only way forward is straight up, even when everyone else says it can't be done.